Hello, myself Sunil. This is the 46th number part of the PHP. So that is basically the conditions. So see basically the while loop. This whole thing basically we have already saw. So that's why basically I am just scrolling down. But there are basically hundreds of way of doing the programming. So you basically are not supposed to go with the hundreds way. I have taken one example of one person basically was using always for loop, but his investment basically was done in while loop basically. So but here basically it's not his mistake basically, that was the World Bank mistake basically. They had prepared products in wrong way basically, so that was basically their mistakes. Now basically the functions basically, PHP functions basically. What is functions? That also basically we have. So more than thousands of built-in functions basically are there. So if it's written 1000, that means it might be more basically, but majorly used might be within 1000 basically. In this basically user defined functions are also there. User defined function means one of the person to that user defined means what basically. So user defined means you can say its own creation basically. It's like but one of the person basically told that how this might be connecting to the real world basically, that is the physical area. So it's like in within function basically what are the things basically getting used. So 1% the if loop, fire loop, variables, these, that, basically while loop, then the variable declaration, then the database connection, this, that, this, each and everything. So this whole thing basically doesn't have the physical location. Yes, basically it have. Then also basically physically basically how it might be connected. That basically I will leave this as a question basically, because it's very difficult to handle this all the stuff also, because it's a user defined function basically. But this is the majorly used in the software industry basically, that is also the main thing basically. This is the majorly because the entire framework basically which is created in PHP, Cake is there, Laravel is there, Symfony is there. These all are using this majorly user defined functions basically. Because for example, Symfony group basically, they have created their user defined function basically. For their basically, for them basically it's a user defined function. But the person who is using the Symfony framework basically, for them basically it's a not user defined basically, it's a inbuilt function basically. But for Symfony framework group basically, it's a user defined function only basically. So what basically function contains? It's possible to create the function. Function is a block of statement respectively in the program. Function will not execute automatically when the page are loaded. Function are to be called basically. So function basically never gets automatically called. That's written basically. So create function. How basically to write function in PHP? Function name and this, and call the function through this name, and semicolon basically you have to use. Why? Semicolon means end of statement basically. So see basically the function basically used. This basically function is called and semicolon has been used basically. Parameter means here basically you have to pass the parameter, and here basically also you have to pass the parameter. These variables can be used within the function scope basically, but it outside basically you can't use it basically. So this all basically might be given in the another topic basically. So arguments, see basically this all are the arguments. This whole thing basically, this function called name is passed as this, so it will print this and it will break also this basically, right? And it will concat this basically. this pass. So this all will get print basically. In short, basically, I understand. So two parameters passed. So number of basically parameter you can pass basically. So see basically the default value passed basically. So its return default value is 50. So like this also basically you can pass. But this type of utility basically many less programming language basically gives. This type of thing basically directly passing the argument default value, that that also basically is given basically, but this syntax way is basically totally different basically. Default value basically you can give to the function, but many less functionality, many less programming language basically allow this, because it's very risky na basically. If you are not passing anything, then it will take a default value, so that's very dangerous thing basically. In real world basically it's very dangerous. So default value basically I will not prefer the default value, but people basically use the default value basically. So see basically function passed, this basically will concrete this everything basically we have. So basically argument by reference, that everybody knows basically. It's a reference value basically. Whatever things basically you are passing, it's connecting to the reference basically. PHP are the argument passed by the value, which means that the copy of the value used into the function. So you can just imagine it. So it's a reference basically. Variable number of arguments. So see basically it's connecting to the arrays. So lots of arrays also basically you can give basically. But arrays are also basically very risky in function basically. But majorly basically Symphony Group, the framework basically who created the framework, they have used array as argument too much basically. So this everything basically is very dangerous thing basically, which has created the framework, which has created, it's very dangerous basically. Because you don't know the real world basically. For example, if condition is connected with 100 cities, for loop is connected with 100 cities, that means for loop is created on the base of 100 cities, right? Function basically are created, right? Ready-made function basically are connecting to the, so PHP will handle the ready-made functions, but that need to check basically the user-defined function basically how they have create. That depends upon the investment basically of the PHP group basically who do on the tax base basically. Whenever basically they are paying the tax, so on the base of tax only basically the investment basically are done basically. So that basically very dangerous. That's why basically I'm telling you. If PHP group will not pay the tax, then they will not allow the PHP user defined function to run basically very smoothly basically. But function will run basically, but it might be possible that the function will run very slow. This type of performance tuning basically will create problem. Lots of things basically might happen. So that's why basically the Symphony projects, Cake Frame projects, that basically works very slowly. Why? Reason might be the investment basically. So that basically only World Bank basically can do. Nobody else basically can do it, because you don't have the authority to do the even basically the World Bank basically don't have the authority, because they have basically not done this properly. Why? For loop investment, the person basically was using for loop only, but they invested in while loop basically. So that was error basically, find which was done by the World Bank basically. So here basically we software industry basically are not supposed to enter into this. It's very dangerous. So in next video basically we will to see a little bit more about this topic.